6:15 in the morning, I sought protein powder for my smoothie before a workout. Nothing out of the ordinary. I suspected Kaylee's vanilla tub was still tucked away in her gym bag, which I found on our closet floor. I reached past her yoga mat and headphones to find an unfamiliar object, a prepaid flip phone, typically bought at gas stations for $30. It wasn't Kaylee's iPhone, and my heart tightened, but I convinced myself there must be a plausible explanation. Maybe it was for work purposes, perhaps an old backup, or maybe I was overthinking things. I opened the phone to investigate. The screen illuminated with a solitary alert. 3 fresh voicemails awaited. My finger hovered above the play button. I recognized that act would alter something. You always know. A moment before the grenade explodes when you sense the pin release, I hit play. The first message consisted of 8 seconds of static and an abrupt disconnection. The second was a low, familiar man's voice saying simply, "Call me back." However, it was the third message that paused my heart. "Kaylee, it's me. Hey, Heed, we must plan before his next deposition. I've managed to convince him we're constructing a robust defense, but I'm stalling discovery as much as possible. At least another 6 weeks are necessary, amounting to an additional $18,000 in fees he won't challenge. And once we receive the forensic accountant's report, which I ensure will discover precisely what we need it to find, you'll depart with the house, the brokerage account, and at least 60% of the business valuation." He is oblivious. Nearly effortless. Give me a call tonight. I'll be residing in the apartment. Recognized the tone instantly, faced it across a conference table 2 months ago, wrote it a check for $20,000, entrusted it with my future. Thaddeus Crane, my attorney, almost dropped the phone hearing his voice. Collapsed on the bed's edge as my legs buckled. Spent a while gazing at the wall, struggling to match the words I'd just heard with a plausible reality. My wife was unfaithful with my lawyer. Yet it was far more than that, much, much worse. They weren't merely involved in an affair. They were orchestrating a systematic scheme to drain me financially. Thaddeus deliberately prolonged the case to inflate his fees. He was divulging my private financial strategies to Kaylee. Every word I spoke with him, every document I provided, every fear I disclosed, she was privy to it all. Upon replaying the voicemail for the 4th time, I picked up on something I had missed. They were not anxious or cautious. They were laughing. Thaddeus dismissed me as a golden retriever, too trusting and too stupid to notice the noose around my neck. A chill filled me, not fury, not yet, but a calm, patient sensation. I returned the phone to its gym bag, exactly where I found it. I made my smoothie. I went to the gym. I greeted the front desk girl as if it were an ordinary Tuesday, and I started plotting. Here's something about myself. I'm not given to confrontation. For the past 6 months, I haven't resorted to violence as an adult, not even when Kaylee announced her intent to divorce. Instead of shouting or pleading, I inquired about her requirements to facilitate a seamless process. She disclosed she had already consulted a lawyer and advised me to do the same, even suggesting Thaddeus highly regarded by her. As it turned out, he indeed looked after my interests. Over those months, I'd observed inconsistencies that seemed suspicious. Thaddeus exhibited an unusual level of pessimism concerning my case, even though I entered the marriage with more assets than Kaylee did. He consistently urged me to prepare for substantial compromises and scrutinized every settlement proposal I made. The discovery phase lingered. Depositions were repeatedly postponed. Bills kept pouring in regularly, which I attributed to thoroughness and insider knowledge. However, I was mistaken. After discovering the phone, I spent 2 weeks accumulating information without altering my behavior in any way. I attended my meetings with Thaddeus, nodding thoughtfully at his suggestions. Upon returning home to Kaylee, we engaged in casual conversation about her gym sessions. Over 2 weeks, I discovered 3 facts. Firstly, Thaddeus and Kaylee had been a couple for over a year before she filed for divorce, not an affair that developed during the proceedings. Instead, the affair was the reason for the divorce, as he was her exit strategy. Secondly, Thaddeus had access to all my confidential information, including bank statements, business valuations, and private correspondence with my accountant, which he shared with Kaylee, who then passed it on to her attorney. Thirdly, they had a plan. After the divorce was finalized and Kaylee had acquired at least half of my assets, they would wait 6 months before meeting publicly. Thaddeus would leave his firm, and they would establish a family law practice in Scottsdale together. They had already selected an office space. I found out this information because Kaylee was careless. She left her burner phone in the same spot every time, and Thaddeus, a brilliant man from Georgetown, sent voicemails as if he were dictating a diary entry, displaying arrogance. On the 15th day, I made my decision. Confronting them would only give them time to regroup. Filing a complaint against Thaddeus would take months and not halt the divorce process. Even if I found a new attorney, Kaylee already knew all my cards. I needed to change the game, so I created Project Helios, nothing more than a name and a fiction, but I made it seem real. I established a shell company in Delaware for $800 and an afternoon fabricated fake documents, internal memos, wire transfer confirmations, and a forged account statement from a bank in the Cayman Islands, suggesting that Helios was a holding entity for $5 million in offshore investments, money I had allegedly been hiding from the court. I left these documents in my home office, in a drawer that Kaylee knew I considered private, knowing she would look again. 3 days later, Thaddeus called me for an urgent meeting, saying he had received a tip that opposing counsel might be investigating hidden assets. He asked me carefully if there was anything I hadn't disclosed. I let him see fear in my eyes. It wasn't hard, as I thought about what they had done to me, and the anger turned into rage, which I buried under a mask of panic. I told him, "There's something I need to tell you, but you have to promise me this stays between us." He leaned forward, and I saw the flicker of hunger, the predator sending blood. "Dorian," he said, "I'm your attorney. Everything you tell me is privileged." So I told him about Helios, describing it as my insurance policy, a fund I had built over 15 years by skimming cash from business deals and funneling it offshore untraceable. 2 weeks later, we were in mediation with retired Judge Carolyn Frost, who had seen every trick in the book. Kaylee sat on the other side of the table with her attorney, a nervous young man who kept glancing at his phone. Thaddeus played his role as my trusted advocate. We had been negotiating for an hour, discussing the house, retirement accounts, and business interests, when Kaylee's attorney cleared his throat and proposed amending their proposal. They would waive all claims to the primary residence, retirement accounts, and spousal support in exchange for sole ownership of Project Helios. The room went silent as I stared at the document, then at Kaylee. Her face was composed, but her eyes were bright with triumph. I said quietly, "I don't know what you're talking about." Thaddeus put his hand on my arm. His voice was gentle, understanding. "If there's been some misunderstanding about asset disclosure, now is the time to address it." "There was no misunderstanding," Kaylee said, enjoying herself. "They knew about the offshore accounts. They had documentation if I wanted to perjure myself in front of Judge Frost," she added. Judge Frost asked to see this documentation, and Kaylee's attorney handed over the forged documents I had planted, the ones I had given Thaddeus. Judge addressed Aldrich. "These communications seem to reference a significant offshore asset. Do you deny their authenticity?" I hesitated, my hands trembled or gave that impression. "Helios, it's intricate," I responded. "It's taken decades to establish. It's my life's achievement." Thaddeus leaned in, his voice barely audible to others. "Dorian, listen to me. If they probe this in court, they might undo everything. You could face federal charges. Hand over Helios, retain your liberty, your reputation. It's the sensible move." I stared at him, at the man I had hired for protection, now suggesting I surrender to the one conspiring against me. "All right," I murmured. "All right, I'll sign." I signed the amendment. Kaylee signed the waiver, waiving all other claims. Thaddeus verified the document with a steady hand. When it was done, Kaylee avoided looking at me, already on her phone, possibly texting Thaddeus about their win. I shook hands with Judge Frost and left the courtroom alone. It was a frigid day. The sky was overcast. I sat in my car for 5 minutes without igniting the engine, then I smiled. The essence of shell companies lies in their simplicity. They can house assets, they can hold liabilities. Upon establishing Project Helios, I didn't create an asset. Instead, I set up a potential burden. Helios was merely a designated liable party for an environmental restoration project linked to an abandoned manufacturing site in Ohio, on paper. The prior owner had abandoned the cleanup, and a shell company took on the responsibility following a series of negotiations I orchestrated with a high-priced and confidential environmental lawyer. The EPA's current evaluation puts the cleanup cost at $4.2 million. When Kaylee acquired Helios, she didn't obtain $5 million in secret assets. Instead, she inherited a debt mandated by the government amounting to $4.2 million. She discovered this 16 days after mediation when an official letter from the EPA arrived, demanding a remediation timeline and proof of financial capacity. It is said that she fainted upon receiving the letter and subsequently hired 3 different attorneys in an attempt to reverse the transfer. The signature was indeed hers, and the waiver was watertight, scrutinized meticulously by my new top-notch lawyer. Yet she found herself in a predicament. However, I was far from done. The same day an EPA letter arrived, a package reached the Office of Disciplinary Counsel at the State Bar Association. Inside was a burner phone and a flash drive housing audio recordings and transcripts of 3 months' worth of messages, secretly retrieved before returning the phone to its gym bag. The material presented a comprehensive case, revealing an attorney actively conspiring with adversaries to defraud his client. It exposed breaches of privilege, illegal sharing of confidential communications, and a scheme to artificially inflate fees and manipulate court processes. Thaddeus was informed of the probe 4 days later, and within the week, his law firm requested his resignation. In March, a criminal referral led to the district attorney's office. Latest updates indicate he's charged with 3 felonies and temporarily disbarred pending appeal. The Scottsdale office space is vacant now. Regarding Kaylee, her attempt at bankruptcy to evade EPA responsibility was unsuccessful. Discharging environmental obligations is notoriously challenging. To help cover her legal costs, her parents took out a second mortgage. Currently, she resides in their guest room, receiving calls from federal regulators and negotiating a lifelong debts payment plan. She left a voicemail, distraught. She questioned how everything had turned awry and asked for help. I deleted the message without replying. The memory of that morning when I found her phone, moments before pressing play, often resurfaces. A straightforward reality keeps haunting me. Every action has consequences. If Thaddeus had been cautious with his voicemails and Kaylee had concealed the phone adequately, I wouldn't have found them out. Had they exercised even an ounce of prudence, they would have drained me financially, fled to Arizona, and never looked back. But they didn't. Greed often leads to carelessness. It makes people impulsive. It makes them think they are more intelligent than everyone around them, and this misconception blinds them to the reality that the person they were exploiting might be paying closer attention than assumed. Earlier, I pondered if I was overly trusting. Now I understand the reality. I wasn't excessively trusting. Rather, I was trusting enough to provide them with an opportunity and patient enough to watch as they bound themselves. Some people inquire about my guilt regarding Kaylee, her debt, her ruined life. I don't feel guilty. She willingly agreed to the terms. She relinquished all rights to everything we had jointly constructed, opting for something she felt she had wrongfully taken. She did so with a grin on her face, believing she had prevailed. All I did was grant her precisely what she requested. The residence is now tranquil. I've repainted the bedroom and procured an unflavored protein powder as I no longer favor vanilla. Occasionally, I sit on the back porch with a glass of an expensive beverage, watching the sun set. I ponder the future. I ponder the fact that I'm 42 years old with my entire life stretching out before me, and not one soul, not a single individual has any claim on my next move. Kaylee used to claim I was too passive, that I allowed people to trample over me, that I lacked the will to battle. She was partially correct. I don't fight, I wait, I observe. I allow people to reveal their true selves, and then when they are least expecting it, I reveal myself. The original voicemail, the catalyst, remains stored on a drive in my safety deposit box. Occasionally, I contemplate replaying it to rekindle the memory, but it's unnecessary as every word is etched in my mind. He remains oblivious. Interestingly enough, this is surprisingly simple. As she had foretold, it was effortless, albeit not for her.